We're talking about heaven, and this is our fourth message on the subject, and I want to describe a little more the activities in heaven that we'll be engaging in. And I wanted to start by having some quotes from C.S. Lewis about the practical nature of thinking about heaven, how it applies in our daily lives. And he's made some observations on this subject that I believe are true. First of all, he says, if you read history, you will find that the Christians who did most for the present world were just those who thought most of the next. Then, it is since Christians have largely ceased to think about the other world that they have become so ineffective in this. Another one, and this one is from Matthew 6:33. Lewis says, aim at heaven and you will get earth thrown in. Aim at earth and you will get neither. Words of the wise. The last quote, I must make it the main object of life to press on to that other country and to help others to do the same. Beautiful. No wonder he was a professor of English, to be able to make such insightful comments. So I want you to consider with me some of the characteristics of heaven, and I want to start with one of my favorites that I'm looking forward to, is this matter of music in heaven, because I believe there's going to be a lot of it. In this life and the history of God's people, music has made a significant contribution to good and appropriate worship. And it's a marvelous vehicle for conveying the truth of God. Bishop Gore in the 19th century, an Anglican in England, said, you can write the theology of the church, just let me write the hymns. And if you ponder that for a moment, there's truth to it. I make it a practice each year to go to hear Handel's Messiah in Roy Thompson Hall in Toronto. I take an elderly, he's only about 8 years older than me. I take a widower with me, and I take one of my sons, and I take several of his children, 3 out of the 4. And we listen to that maybe 6 or 7 days before December 25. And I find that all the way through the Christmas season, that music, which is so massive and so powerful and majestic and grandiose, just fills my mind. And the theme of that whole work, starting back in the Old Testament and coming into to Christ and the resurrection, is absolutely stunning. And so the proper music put to the right words, there's a complementation there, there's a binding of the two that each complements the other. And maybe you're not into Baroque music, it's too complicated for you, but I like Handel's stuff quite a bit, and some of the other musicians, the composers of that era. Now in Chronicles, we won't turn to this, but in Chronicles 25, 1-7, we read that in the temple there were 288 people who played a variety of musical instruments and sang. So God sanctions music and wants it to be used in his house for the good of the people and for his own glory. And when I was growing up, my mother took us to the Salvation Army, and they have really nice brass bands for amateurs. And they often will have, in certain corps or temples, whatever you're in, they will have extra good choirs. And the place I went to for several years was Danforth Temple? Danforth Corps, that's what they called it, at Logan and Danforth. And Eric Sharp led the choir, and they did a tour of UK. They sang with other groups in Toronto that were professional, and it was just marvelous. And, 50 odd years later, I can still bring to mind the John 3:16 by Sainer, God so loved the world. I can still hear that choir singing that majestically. It stayed with me. And very, very frequently, when we start to lose our mental faculties, music is soothing and it's good. And when people are coming to the terminal point of life, and they're in a place for people who are dying, I will often say to the family, take in a CD player, put a CD on of Christian music. This person loves the Lord, and that's the last part that goes before death. And I don't do it myself because I don't have the voice, but Willie used to do that in the hospitals around here, go in and sing to people, and people were blessed by it. So music is an absolutely stunning thing. In Psalm 150, the psalmist instructs the people to praise God with, listen to this, trumpets, harps, lyres, tambourines, strings, flutes, cymbals. That's a pretty noisy group. Now, some music is noisy. I was out to a performance in Hamilton Place in the city of Hamilton, appropriately, on Friday night to hear two of my granddaughters sing, and there were some instrumentalists there. There was a couple of orchestras from different high schools in the Halton area, and they had the kettle drums. They had the cymbals. It was nice to see the expression on the young lad's face with the cymbals. He'd get a little bit spastic just before he went whump with them. And it was noisy, but it was beautiful. It worked well. And I come from a tradition, or I went into a tradition after I left the people among whom I was converted. I went into a tradition where we sing a cappella at the Lord's Supper. And I like that, and I believe in that, but I also like the instruments. And music, as we read in Ephesians 5:19, the exhortation is, speaking to yourselves in psalms and hymns and spiritual songs, singing and making melody in your heart to the Lord. Some of the men here have considerably better singing voices than I have. As a matter of fact, I spoke to one of you after service this morning saying how I like to hear your voice. But I can be a Caruso in my heart before God. I can sing with the best of them, Pavarotti, whoever you want to name. I can really let it go inside to my God, even though I can't sing in a group smaller than a quartet without the lower quality of my voice being discovered. So music is wired into the human psyche, if you want to let me use a modern term. And one of the ways of instructing ourselves, encouraging ourselves in our personal devotion, is through this medium of music. And in the descriptions of heaven in the book of the Revelation, there are recorded several hymns that are sung there. In Revelation 15:2-4, for example, it's interesting that the hymn that's there, at least in part, was composed by Moses, as seen in Exodus 15. So some of the music, at least, using that as a starting point, some of the music that's being composed in this world has been carried over into heaven. How much, we don't know. But that one thing of Moses in Exodus 15 got its foot in the door. So what do you think Handel is doing up there now? Or Bach? Those fellows dedicated their music to the glory of God.